So we went through an understanding of the 7 densities. A few points stand out. One is that the human extraterrestrial line is distinct from the angelic or the Deva line. There are 7-dimensional Devas from all, the angels that we say have wings and, are very cute, are also grand beings all the way up through the level of higher self, and work with all evolving kingdoms of souls, of entities, starting with the minerals. And, there are devas going all the way through the level of higher self, but they don't have choice. And this was basically because the Logos, or the creator of each system, needed helpers. And they're the helpers of each octave. So it's also important to understand that in terms of veil, or in terms of lack of awareness of cosmic plan, the prime location for this is 3D physical. So when we die, we're also in the 3rd-dimensional sphere, but it's non-physical and it's unveiled. And so this is called by Roth 3D time-space, as opposed to 3D space-time. And this is the physical world, 3D space-time. We're relatively free to move in space. Our bodies can walk around. But in time, we're sort of fixed or locked, meaning we don't know the past and the future. When we die or go out of body or have a near death, there's the potential and there's the normal condition of being mobile in time but limited in space. And so we can have the experience of flying around, but it may not be actually physical flying. It's an artifact of our belief that we're flying. What's really happening is that the mind is freely moving through time and through the realm of potential and experience in a way that we can't do here in the physical. And so people wonder, well, if there's reincarnation, why is there no proof? If there's soul and karma, if they're ETs, why don't they prove themselves? Well, all these spiritual things that you guys talk about, nobody can prove anything. If it's real, why isn't it clear? Well, it's not, it's planned to be veiled. And of course, a skeptic will say, well, that's really convenient. Or the ETs follow the law of free will, and so they don't intervene or show themselves. Well, isn't that a nice way of hiding, behind, some explanation that justifies why you don't see them? Therefore, your argument falls apart. You have no way of proving it. Well, there you go. We have no way of proving these things. And so Ra talked about truth without proof. Either you believe it's true, or it's true, or you're not sure. But there is no proof. And that's what it's all about. And unfortunately, that also means that, every channel can say, well, I know it's true because I heard it in my mind. I heard it in my head, so I know it's true. I know this is coming from Archangel Michael, or this is coming from E.T. Zorba, or whoever. And therefore you have, the marketplace of New Age spirituality. And obviously we can't argue with anybody or can't convince anybody. And so it's just simply a matter of coming to your own sense of knowing what's real and which voice or which voices represent more mature voices of understanding. So, again, in the channeled books that I've seen, you can't come forth, or they don't present any kind of a very systematized view of the multidimensional universe, or a 7 or 12-dimensional view that's orderly and distinct. What you see here with the 7 densities, and the same as 7 chakras, is each level building upon the previous one, in the sense that development of mind, 5th density, precedes upon development of heart. You can't know deeply unless the heart is open, or we wish to accept the real or the truth. You can't know truth until you first wish to accept it as it is, beyond personal desiring. And so there's no absolute wisdom without absolute love, and therefore the development of love and wisdom in practice is done simultaneously, back and forth, love and wisdom, which means accept it and appreciate it as it is, and receive it and welcome it as it is, and know it clearly as it is, and know it more deeply, and be able to understand and present it more deeply as it is. And in general, this is the salvation of consciousness and personality blockage and suffering in time and space, which is development of love wisdom, especially for 6th density wanderers whose work is the balancing of love wisdom in 6th density. When we're here, life presents us with situation after situation in which the only viable, workable, healing way of handling situations is love wisdom. And our emotional well-being depends on it. And what we do down here is very, very important for our group up there, or out there, the group that is connected to us through our experience here. So a clear understanding of 7-dimensional life relating to 7 chakra life is very important. And we'll talk more about healing and balance and Ra's presentation of the 7 chakras. This is really the heart of their teaching about healing. How to become a healer is first to heal mind, body, spirit. So, if there's a question on cosmic plan.
This is Renee Martin.
Good.
Had a question about adults having double bodies. We were talking about, I don't know if that fits into what you were talking about, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, I think the thing is, you know, New Age words and terms are notoriously simplistic. So when you say indigo children, you think that everybody is 6 years old or 12 years old. And then you say crystal children, so you think everybody's a child, right? In Taiwan, there's actually a book now called Indigo Adults. You know, so people are making up their terms as they go along, and then they find that somebody else's term was inadequate, so they make up a new one. Indigo, I don't know why it's even called indigo, but I guess if you say green children, it sounds a little strange. But the 4th body is green. 6th chakra, 6th dimensional body is indigo. They're not only children. They could be 60 years old. The question is, when did this phenomenon start? Ra said in 1981 it was relatively recent. Okay, so let's say it started in the 70s, or let's say it started in the 60s. I mean, there were a lot of spiritual parents, conscious, birthing and seeking to birth spiritual children. It's in the 60s. So then we have some people who could have been born, you know, what, 1960, 1965. So that means they're 50 years old. So that may be 4th density, double-bodied people, wanderers, who are 50 years old. So it's simplistic to say children. And in terms of who stays and who goes where, it depends on the contract and it depends on their origin. When we get into the Wanderers discussion more, again, further down the line in April, we'll see. But fourth density Wanderers, who are generally double-bodied, will generally remain on Earth after harvest, which means this is their new home. Fifth and sixth density Wanderers will generally leave, meaning they will generally go back to their home dimensional group, which is generally another solar system, not this one, except for some of the fifth density Venusians. That is because the agreement is finished. Harvest, Anne asks about harvest. Harvest equals ascension. Harvest is a term used by George Hunt Williamson in the 50s, and it's used in the Bible. And, unfortunately, it has some image, brings up an image of the Grim Reaper, but that has nothing to do with it. But there is an esoteric dimension to harvest, which is that souls are like crops. A soul growing is really a development of light. The soul in incarnation is a body-mind-spirit complex, a triple energy field. You can think of three balls of energy, three spheres. You can think of your physical body as having a spherical energy form around it. That's the physical etheric energy of body. Interpenetrating that and surrounding that is a mind-body energy cloud or field. So interpenetrating that and surrounding that is the third spherical energy field of spirit. So this is the triple energy field of body, mind, spirit. That is what a soul or higher self manifests, and here we see it in third density. That triple energy field develops increasing capacity to receive and transmit light. The light is the infinite light of creation. It's not physical light, but it's visible to those of sixth density and higher. And it relates to auric light, but it's really the light as seen in the composite seven-dimensional view of the being. That light develops over learning through incarnation. At the end of a cycle of third density, which is each 25,000 years, so harvest then is a releasing to the cosmic environment, to the logos, to the all, of the gathered or intensified light manifesting through the triple energy field body, mind, spirit complex. Okay? That's a long-winded description, but it's pretty close, and as close as I believe, I know. So harvest happens every 25,000 years through third density, through the 75,000 years of third density. Now we have the final Stargate opening, or this release of light is what happens as the dimensional window between 3 and 4 opens each 25,000 years in the third density cycle. This is the last one and the end of the first third density cycle on planet Earth. And so that's the meaning of the term harvest. And in terms of soul movement, it's a three-way split. And the three-way split is those who are harvestable negative, 95% service to self, go with the 4D negative contingent, go to them, Orion, Cassiopeia, Southern Cross, Ra says. There's a very small number. The much larger number who are harvestable positive stay with the planet, either dying first or not dying first. and then that's the the meek inheriting the earth, right? Those who are qualified by love to remain on earth go into the fourth dimensional condition. And then the much larger number and group are those who repeat the cycle, and therefore will go to another third dimensional planet, probably outside the solar system, probably in this portion or sector of the galaxy, and maybe we'll come back when Earth hosts 3D life again. Okay? So that hopefully answers the questions, the basic questions about harvest and ascension. And most wanderers will go home. But again, fourth density wanderers will generally stay here. All right, let's go into ET contact and Earth ET contact, brief history. So the first thing is pre-human civilization. And again, for those of you who have read Zecharia Sitchin or The Gods of Eden or William Bramley or even various channels who comment about Earth history, compare what this is to what you've read before, and some will fit and some won't fit. And when we take time for questions and comments, please jump in with what other things you might have read. It's Ra doesn't say everything about everything clearly, but I believe what they do say about anything is quite accurate, and you can bank on it. So let's go. Pre-human civilization. Maldek Wars. Maldek was a third density planet between, wherever the asteroid belt is. I believe this is between Mars and Saturn. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody else knows. They were even more aggressive than Mars or Atlantis, and did have some high tech because they actually blew up the whole planet. We're talking about wars for 100,000 years, or actually 200,000 years of war, of constant warfare. So as you read this, or as we consider this, consider this is the history or the legacy of the souls who came to Earth. Some of them came from Maldek. This is a planet in our solar system. So this is what's been going on in this solar system. So if you think things are bad here, they were a lot worse previously in this solar system. This is a solar system of enormous warfare in third density. And the degree of disharmony is parallel to, or a reflection of, the degree of sanctity and glory and power and courage of the Logos of this solar system. Logos meaning creator, whose body is the sun. So only a great and beauteous Logos would allow itself to happily, willingly play host to such destructive souls. And I wrote about this in my essay called Human Crisis and Divine Plan, and that's on the website. That talks about the three consciousness groups on Earth, and the history behind it is revealed by the history that I'm presenting here by Ra. So in 600,000 BP, means before present, we see Confederation spiritual healing. So many had died by this time. They were souls on the inner 3D planes. So when we go out of body, we're still in third density, but these are the inner 3D planes. And they needed a lot of healing. 500,000 before present, Maldek destroys itself. The souls transfer to Earth. They become one type of Bigfoot. And, this exemplifies the very kind of scaremongering type of explanation of karma which is, hey, if you're really bad, you're going to be born in the womb of an ass, meaning you're going to be born as an animal. The Hare Krishnas teach, if you eat meat, you'll be born as a cow or a pig. No, however, this view, this point made by Ra, indicates that, well, if you blow up your whole planet, you may need to be reborn in the body of an animal. You meaning, the Maldek souls. The most advanced type of human-animal body at the time, 500,000 years ago, was big, hairy Bigfoots. And so that's where they came into. And I remember, and almost all of those souls have worked out of that condition, meaning they're now in fully 3D forms, not all. And I remember in a zoo in Indonesia once, seeing a monkey playing with other monkeys. He was a little one. And I looked at his face, and I did a double take, and I felt shock and a little fear, because that was a human face in a monkey body. Meaning, it didn't just look like a person, it had the consciousness, or I felt the consciousness of a human soul in that little monkey body. And, it happens. So, this is an interesting point, I think. So, at that time, 500,000 years ago, Earth was hosting only second density life. Second density is mineral, plant, animal, and obviously much more primitive than now. There was no native 3D human soul evolution. However, there were ET groups coming and going at research stations on the surface to monitor the evolution of the proto-humans and, do experiments or whatever they needed to be doing. But there was no native third density population here. And again, you can compare that to some other views, but this is the view here. And so eventually, the highest second density animal groups became bipedal, became ensouled. And that ensoulment happened both by natural evolution with the very, very gradual development of self-consciousness from an animal form, as well as by what's called investment, soul investment. God breathing the spark, the breath of life into Adam. Similar, higher dimensional extraterrestrials placing a seed of a spark of divine self-consciousness into those higher second density creatures. So, yeah, there are still sightings of Bigfoots, and we'll see as we go through this that there are a few kinds of Bigfoot creatures. One is continuing Maldek souls that haven't gotten out of that condition. So it's very interesting. Thank you, Renee, for sending that PDF. You're great. Put that together so fast. I think it was a very important essay, and if you want to talk about it next week, we can. And in some ways, that's what we're studying here through this timeline, which is namely the historical development of consciousness associated with planet Earth. The historical development of 3D consciousness in this solar system. The interrelationship between developing 3D consciousness in the solar system and the Confederation. It's very deep stuff, and really beautiful. And, just hearing it is just one level of integration. But thinking about it, reflecting on it, letting it get in is the next piece of work, and takes much longer. So I'm going to go through the next section, early human civilization, and after that we'll open to some questions. Early human civilization represents the first 50,000 years of 3D. Represents the first two major cycles. There are three major cycles within third density. A major cycle equals 25,000 years, more or less. This is one precession of the equinoxes, which is movement of our solar system around the 12 constellations. And you notice the 12 disciples, and the number 12 is pretty common in various spiritual writings. People talk about 12 chakras. So 12 times a little bit more than 2,000 years is one major cycle in third density, and 3 of those equals the master cycle, or the entire third density learning period. And Ra said the purpose of third density is to learn the ways of love. So the answer, what's the purpose of life, is extremely easy to answer. Extremely easy. And Ra says the purpose of incarnation is the evolution of mind, body, spirit. Very simple. The purpose of incarnation is the evolution of mind, body, spirit. The purpose of third density is to learn the ways of love, which can be expressed as a selfish, ignorant, small love of self, which is service to self. That's quite possible. So let me jump to Derek's question. He says, what's the purpose of the lower dimensional entities Ra talks about who feed on the blood of second density creatures and take forms that inspire fear? All right, well, how about we answer that question a little later? Basically, we're talking about lower third density inner planes. I shouldn't have answered this question now. They basically get sustenance from lower emotions. So, various creatures take sustenance from various forms of energy. So, let's continue with early human civilization. Sorry for that digression. I'm just learning when to answer questions myself. So let me go in. Basically, Ra doesn't talk about the Martian civilization, but they talk about its ending. The ending happened 75,000 years ago, and almost all of them transferred to 3D Earth at the time, or the 3D human bodies on Earth. And so this was considered the beginning of human civilization, the beginning of third density evolution. 50% Martian, 25% native, meaning evolution from animals in the ordinary, very slow way of sort of self-ensoulment, or consciousness naturally developing a sense of self without necessarily being invested from higher dimensional beings. And 25% was other 3D souls. So, it's a kind of motley crew. We got 50% coming from a planet that just blew off its atmosphere in a solar system which just lost a planet to warfare. 25% just walked out of the ape body into a human, qualified to be in a human body. And 25% were from other 3D planets who missed their evolution. So, it's a kind of a motley crew on Earth 75,000 years ago. And again, 25% would be the number that evolved from the apes at that time. In terms of the Bigfoots, nobody had evolved out of that condition yet. They were still disoriented in those bodies, and quite traumatized, actually, by having blown up their planet. I mean, it's traumatic to blow up your planet. So, the Confederation / Yahweh. And now we're going to get into the heavy stuff that will only be explicated and unraveled as we keep going through this. Yahweh, according to Ra, is the name of a 6th density, positive, of course, 6th density Confederation group. Okay. They, the Confederation, through Yahweh, made their initial aid or assistance to the Martian souls who came to Earth. This was the first major genetic intervention, cloning, by walking among, actually, coming here, and the sexual means. There may have been other genetic methods, meaning non-sexual technological only. The purpose of this genetic intervention was to sharpen the senses and strengthen the mind. There was another genetic intervention that happened a few thousand years ago, not that long ago, with a similar purpose. This is the first major intervention, which was okayed by the Council of Nine, meaning the Council of Saturn that oversees such interdimensional or higher dimensional intervention on Earth. This was okayed at the time. However, it was then adjudged or assessed to be somewhat in violation of the free will of those early 3D souls, and therefore the light quarantine was intensified around Earth. This is a whole nother subject, the quarantine around Earth. The quarantine around Earth basically makes it hard for negative groups from Orion, 4D negative, makes it difficult for them to come in full force, but it doesn't stop them completely. It just gives them a challenge, and it's willingly obeyed or willingly followed by the Confederation or positive ETs. When we say Confederation, we're saying 4th, 5th, and 6th density positive. When we say Orion, we're saying generally 4th and 5th density negative. This quarantine was intensified after the Yahweh assistance to the Martian souls. Bear in mind, the human lifespan was 900 years at that time. So this was the start. 60,000 years ago, BP means again before present, we're talking about the Orion group influence, their first major, they played their first cards. they made their first move, which was telepathic contact with the very primitive humans and power-charged stone formations in Central America and Pacific Oceania. So Ra talks about the Nazca lines, the heads of Easter Island. I also wonder myself about the Olmec heads in Central America, but I know they're dated to not that long ago. Olmec, O-L-M-E-C, civilization was not that long ago, but they also seem to be power-charged stone heads. This was considered an unsuccessful attempt, and no negativity was achieved. This is basically trying to impress the primitive mind of the early humans to say, look, power, big head, big stone, big power. I want power. Let me beat up my my cave mates. Let me club them and let me be the boss because I want power like I see, me see power, me want power, me beat you, me get power. And that's the beginning of service to self in early 3D. It's as simple as that. That was what that was all about. So, grunt, yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, you gotta kind of connect with that, right? That was the way they offer service, They're offering service by offering the early version of service to self-teaching. Power is good. You want power. You can see the same kind of bidding, B-I-D-D-I-N-G, the same kind of soliciting done today, like you see Mr. Banker with the big cigar. Hey, look at my big cigar. Wow, everybody thinks I want a big cigar too. So it's the same kind of, monkey see, monkey do. Monkey see power, monkey want power, monkey get power, the beginning of service to self. 2,000 years after that, we see Confederation, initial direct aid to early Lemurian or Mu civilization. This was a prolonged contact. This was when Lemuria was starting, right? Or Lemuria was in the Pacific Ocean, and then we see the, Orion Easter Island heads in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So that was, above ground, obviously, and not in an ocean 60,000 years ago. 53,000 BP, Lemurian civilization was fully established, but they were not technological. And Ross says, primitive group mind, but spiritually advanced. Bear this in mind. There's body, mind, spirit. Bodily, they were quite primitive, and not really even very, not even fully informed, fully in their bodies, but very kind of thick body condition, not evolved. Mentality also was primitive, but they were spiritually advanced. And this is something to ponder. One can have a high level of spiritual consciousness and a low level of mental development. And Ross says that Lemuria was later destroyed by Earth tectonic plate readjustment and flooding. So just to think that, hey, bad things don't happen to good people is wrong. They were spiritually advanced. And Ross called Lemuria a helpful and harmless place. They were helpful, they were good, they were kindly. And we can think of the indigenous groups, indigenous peoples like, all over the world, sort of like the Hopis, let's say. Okay, well, the Hopis are beautiful people. They weren't warlike, as far as I know. And not because they were negative, but because of plate tectonic readjustment, Lemuria was swept under the ocean, and that's the end of that. Welcome to third density. That's what happens here. And that's something to bear in mind. Anyway, the survivors went to Russia, North and South America, and became the current indigenous groups. And many were originally from the second density planet in Deneb. A lot and many of the 3D souls on Earth now are those who didn't graduate other 3D cycled planets, meaning they missed harvest, they missed the graduation on other 3D worlds. So this is like slacker planet, you can say. But, everybody's doing their best. So that's what's going on. So, and with the washing under the oceans of Lemuria, so ended the end of major cycle number 1. No harvest of Earth's 3D souls, and the lifespan had degraded a little bit to 700 years. Now, there was then a calling from Earth Maldek souls, the Bigfoot, the 3D souls in Bigfoot bodies, 46,000 years. And the Confederation offered love light, telepathically. You see, the Confederation waits for the call, and they say, unlike Orion, who calls itself. So when we're trying to help people, to the extent that we call ourselves, like, let me come over and do that for you, let me tell you what you should eat, let me tell you what you should read, let me give you the healing techniques, let me teach you this, let me do that, that's calling ourselves to service. That's the way of Orion. That's the way of negative entities who call themselves to service. Now, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't offer, but there's something to bear in mind. Ra says, service is requested only to the degree it is requested. So service is effective only to the degree it is requested. So the more people request, the better or more effective our service will be. And pushing ourselves upon people is not positive, even though it may be helpful in some cases. So yeah, Vandy says, continuing to offer and offer is ego-oriented. Pushing and pushing is not the way of service to others. So the Confederation waited for the calling, and the Bigfoot souls, or the Maldek souls, were realizing, my God, what am I doing? I'm in this animal body. I'm in this gorilla. Help. And the Confederation did what they could. 31,000 BP, here we go. The beginning of Atlantean civilization. Slow-growing agrarian conglomerate. So many different places pulling together, farming. No tech at this time, 31,000 years ago. And then, bang, that's the end of the second cycle. 25,000 years BP, 50,000 years had ended in 3D. No harvest again. The lifespan way down, 35 to 100 years. The population of Earth, 345,000, or something like that. There was one group in South America. Ra used the term elder race, and you can find some books about it, but I'm not sure which ones. The elder race population of 150, lifespan 900 years, all 4D positive harvestable, all remained in 3D. And Ra said that they actually later, in continuing in third density, joined monastic orders, and some of the famous Catholic brothers and sisters and monks of later times actually are from this elder race. I think he even said, Ross said, St. Francis of Assisi. So it's interesting. We've gone through 50,000 years of human history, and we've gone from Maldek, through Mars, through Lemuria, to Atlantis. And we see the elder group, the elder race. Interestingly, Ross said that they were contacted by an entity, an angelic form, an angelic entity, who basically showed them telepathically where Earth was going. And what's really interesting about Atlantis is it ended very quickly or soon after it intensified technological development. So it didn't last very long in its high-tech condition. And that's because of how they used it. So 13,000 years ago, Confederation aid to Atlantis. And here's where they got into trouble. They gave pyramid designs and pyramids, crystal designs, or usage and crystals, healing techniques. Lifespan was already greatly reduced at that time. We see that 25,000 BP, lifespan already down to 35 years, 35 to 100. Humans had basically harmed themselves, had become so disharmonious in consciousness that the etheric body couldn't support a life beyond 100 years, which was which is 1/10 of what it should be in 3D. And then initial usage of intelligent energy for negative polarization. And here we go. The Atlanteans were using it as cloning for genetic superiority. Seems like they're doing some of this today. Of course they are. If you want to hear about cloning, you can check out the links on this fellow, Peter Beater. It's his real name, and he died early and talked a lot about cloning. Intelligent energy is the energy available at 6th chakra that comes ultimately from, infinite energy, or the universal energy field, accessed from the 7th chakra. So 7 hits 6, or the shuttle, the connector, is established for a person who's done this in terms of spiritual practice, bridging 6th chakra to 7th chakra. That allows what's called intelligent infinity. Ra talks about intelligent infinity as the quality of 7th chakra life. It's beyond consciousness, actually. 7th chakra life is intelligent infinity. When it manifests in form, meaning into this dimension, it comes through 6th chakra as intelligent energy. So those who can use intelligent energy are either those who've opened the channel between 6th and 7th chakra, or those with sufficient technology. And Tesla you can say, was, working on that, had developed that kind of technology to draw energy from the infinite source, from the cosmic field and the planetary field, which is considered a contact with intelligent energy. So the Atlanteans immediately started using it for negative polarization. And you can see what happened. 11,000 BP, Ra contacted Egyptians, they were still Egyptians, and made direct landings for the teaching the Law of One. This was the first teaching of the Law of One. The meaning was distorted, of course. Yes, thank you, Renee, for that link. Peter David Beater is the guy. And huge audio library. All of this is pre-internet. He died in the 80s or 90s. And I had heard about him in the 90s and thought, hey, what a cute name. So I didn't think further, but now I see that he has a lot. He really understood some of the hidden dark secrets of negative activity here. So Ra contacted the Egyptians 11,000 years ago. They made direct landing. Immediately the meaning was distorted, and the first major Atlantean wars were going on. Approximately 40% population death. So that's pretty heavy war, huh? That's sobering, right? Partial migration to North Africa. So I guess there was, you can say that Ra's contact with the Egyptians, I can't say whether there was a group of Atlanteans in North Africa that Ra contacted before the migration, or it's the migration of the Atlanteans leaving the war districts to North Africa that Ra contacted in terms of Egyptians. But James Hertock also has done some research. J.J. Hertock wrote The Keys of Enoch, also did some research, I believe, finding what appears to be radiation melted sand in the Libyan desert of Libya. So I believe there is physical evidence of Atlantean nuclear weaponry in North Africa today. Of course, it's all hidden and not acknowledged. So here we're getting into Atlantis and their downfall. 10,821 years before present. That number comes from the dating of the contact that Ra mentioned this. So it's approximate, but it's a little precise. You have to get into the sessions themselves if we want to go back and forth about the exact date. Final destruction of Atlantis by nuclear, crystal energy warfare, civilization ends, that's it. Triple migration to safe mountainous regions, Tibet, Peru, and Turkey, and the root of the mystery schools. So, the architecture, the house building design, clothing, facial architecture is very similar between Tibet and Peru. We know that. And there was a famous visit of Tibetans to Peru a number of years ago. Turkey also is considered a root of the mystery school, or mystery schools. So, basically, Atlantis had a 4,000-year run. 15,000 BP to about 11,000 BP, and that was the end of that. And they did themselves in. But it took another 1,000 years for final Earth changes. So, 1,000 years of Earth changes followed upon the destruction of their civilization. That's heavy. Sinking of Atlantean land masses, direct result of warfare. That's 9,600 years before the present. Or, compare that to the flood, right? The flood of Noah's flood. 8,500 BP. Ra enters, returns to the Earth inner planes. They begin the thought construction of the Great Pyramid. 7,500 BP. Confederation aid to South America. So there was, life goes on, right? The Lemurian remnant Some of that went to South America. That was also continuing during the time of Atlantis. Perhaps they rode out the whole thing and they continued along. So Ra offers further aid to them in South America. These were Amazon landings and teachings, pyramids and hidden cities. So that's, the time of the Crystal Skull, stuff like that, Indiana Jones. You can see Ra said that one of their fellow Sixth Density Confederation groups went to South America while they went to Egypt. 6,000 BP, 4,000 before Christ, BC, right? 4,000 BC. Great Pyramid is completed by Ra, made from thought. It appears instantly. They contacted Akhenaten. Akhenaten was the pharaoh. Okay, so let's go through the last few paragraphs here, and we'll go up to modern times. So Ra says they built the Great Pyramid, and that helps explain why it's so perfect.